This episode is one for the books. I knew it would be special, but nothing prepared me for what Terry Gaynor, class of 1969, had to share. A veteran and a towering figure in law enforcement, his stories are raw, they are riveting, and absolutely unforgettable. This conversation captures the enduring legacy of a true, proud Raven.
And I remember going home and my wife, I was working afternoon shift, was the busy shift. She was a nurse working in emergency rooms. And I went home saying, I don't think we're going to arrest our way out of this. And it just doesn't seem to be the values I learned at Benedict's or at Mendel High School about what Catholicism is supposed to be about. So I somehow feel that I'm arresting the children of people my older brothers and my uncles arrested. And I said, if we keep this up, my kids, some who became policemen, are going to be arresting the grandkids.
Welcome to Always a Raven, a Benedictine College podcast that goes far beyond the brick streets of Atchison, Kansas. Hosted by Janelle Menz, Always a Raven offers a unique glimpse into Ravens from all generations. From where are they now to remember when, these conversations share career triumphs and personal milestones. So whether you are an alum looking to reconnect, a prospective student, or simply curious about what makes Benedictine College so special, join us and discover the enduring power of Benedictine College.
On today's episode, I am thrilled to welcome Terry Gaynor, a 1969 graduate of Benedictine College. He currently resides in Illinois. He's originally from Illinois, and really what sums up Terry is he's given a life of public service to our great country, and we are so thankful not only for that, but to call him a Raven, and I am extra thankful for you joining me here today, Terry.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. It's good to be with you for a period of time here, Janelle. Thank you.
You're welcome. I just want to get to the chase here. What initially drew you to Benedictine back in the 60s?
Well, it's actually pretty easy. It came out of my high school. I went to Mendel Catholic High School, an Augustinian school that more people are aware of now with our new Pope, Leo the 14th. Because here's the smallest side. What a timely time for you to do this. Pope Leo the 14th's mother was the librarian at my high school.
Oh my goodness, no way.
Yes, it's true. And two of his brothers went to Mendel High School after I did.
Okay.
A good Augustinian school. And one of their teachers there, one of my favorite teachers, was a Mr. Byrne, a math teacher. And I loved him as a teacher. I thought I was going to excel in math. I wanted to be a math major in St. Benedict's. St. Benedict's is, I still have a tendency to refer to it that way. I'm trying to beat it out of my vocabulary. But I was drawn to where he went to college, so I applied there in St. Ambrose and another smaller college in the Midwest. And blessedly, SBC, St. Benedict's, invited me to come down.
So I've heard through the grapevine, through some other alum in that era, that they came sight unseen. Is that your case, or did you come visit before you?
No, it was sight unseen. There was no college trips here and there.
Yeah. I wondered I don't know the answer to this, but I should find out when that started to be like such a thing. Cause I think back to I think I made my parents go on a world tour and we looked at like 12 colleges before I picked Benedictine. So there's something to be said about just kind of trusting and going with your gut. So you get here in the 1960s, 65-ish, and the world looked a lot different back then. So and Benedictine did too. So how would you describe it?
Well, I was amazed. I thought it was a huge place. Listen, the funny thing about this, I came from a family of 9 brothers and sisters, 10 of us. We lived in a small home on the south side of Chicago. I think there was only 2 private bedrooms, my mom's, and then 2 of my sisters had, my mom and dad and 2 sisters, and the rest of us lived up in what we described as an attic. So there was always 6 or 7 boys in this one gigantic room. So when I went down to Benedict's and thought I was going to have my own room, I was pretty bedazzled.
Sure.
And even my first dorm was St. Joe Hall.
Oh my gosh.
That's the reaction I get from almost any current or student afterwards. And it was 2 to us to a room.
Oh, wow.
But even I thought that was pretty luxurious.
I bet.
I thought the campus was beautiful. Um, and I was very comfortable, even though, as you said, I got on a train in downtown Chicago with 2 suitcases and got off a train in Kansas City and then took a bus to Benedict's with a bunch of other guys I had never met before. So
Oh
that
my
was my
goodness.
introduction, but I was impressed.
Yeah. Were you at any point in that train ride or the bus ride, were you like, what am I doing? Or were you like, you know what? Like, I get to have my own room. Like this, I don't care what the elements are.
I think I was nervous because I had not had a lot of time away from home. I had never been on a plane. I don't think I'd ever been on a long uh, train trip either. And so it was all mysterious. And I was probably concerned about funding and money, to tell you the
Sure.
truth.
Sure. So you're here, you're living in St. Joe Hall, you have a little bit more elbow room in your dorm. So talk about what life was like, first couple years and what are some memories that have stuck with you through all the years?
Well, some of these are old guy stories because, again, it was all male at
Right.
St. Benedict's. Had nothing really to do with those first couple of years with the Mount St. Scholastica. Uh, People, even my own children or grandchildren, or even when I was back on the campus for a graduation talking to students, they find it hard to believe that we had a curfew. You had to be in your dorm at a certain time. No one but seniors had an automobile. And things
Really?
were pretty strict at the time. There was no one living off campus.
Hmm.
Everything was on campus. So the whole life that we lived revolved around the campus of St.
Sure.
Benedict's and a few places we might go to walk downtown. But it was fascinating. The gymnasium, the old gymnasium, and sometimes I'm not real good on the new names anymore, Janelle, but where we gathered and got our beanies and sat in there and uh, had our first lectures from the administration. It was all pretty darn exciting. But it
Yeah.
was a very, very different time. It was nearly all white, all male, and it was conservative. Yeah, it was very different, but not so dissimilar from living on the south side of Chicago, where you were either Catholic or you were public, and you
Mm.
pretty much were with the same people of your same class, the same look, and that's how
Hmm.
initially it was at Benedict's.
Yeah. Do you think obviously it's evolved over the years, but that heart of kind of that steadfast roots that was obviously existed when you were here, kind of that core, this is what we do, this is how things are. I think that has transcended through the century, up until today of just that community aspect of it's a part of the thread that binds us, even if things are a little bit different and have evolved for good or for bad. I think that core of foundation of just kind of locking in to here's where you are and here's what your experience. I think that's why it is still the way it is. Would you agree?
I would agree. And, the St. Joseph Hall is and was very small, even though there were two to a room. And that core of individuals, those who ultimately stayed and graduated with me in 69, I remain friends with several of them now, very, very close friends, and
Wow.
have followed them and their children. Uh, and we're still in touch. So it was the community.
Hmm.
And then again, as small as the class was, you really got to know everyone. And again, back to a little bit of the times of society then, the Vietnam War kicking up, the disorders that were going on in society about how black and white were trying to get together. That was still part of the campus life. We talked about that. We were involved in it. And then I became, if you don't mind, I'll go back to the math thing. I went down there to be a math student. And
Yeah.
so I loaded up on classes, probably what would be referred to as the STEM end of business now,
Sure.
but it
Sure.
wasn't a term then. And I took that, um, what was my first math course? I guess it was geometry. Maybe that might be the wrong term. But I failed it. I failed it. No, I got a D in it. And intent on being a math whiz, second semester, I took it again,
Hmm.
and calculus it was, excuse me. And so, in the middle of the second semester of my second time at calculus, the priest grabbed me, and I think it was Father Cheaper, maybe it was Father Conrad who taught a lot of chemistry and physics too. He pulled me aside and really said, "Terry, I just don't think this math is for you. And a part, it was heartwarming, not disappointing, but here was a priest who went out of his way to say, I think you're on the wrong track.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, my report card from that first semester was evidence of that. And so I did drop that course and I ultimately switched to sociology, which is, as they say, the bus I needed to be on, the seat I needed to be in on, and where it was heading.
Right. That's great. That's great. Right person, right seat. Is that kind of a, I think that's a corporate saying. Yeah. So then the bus can go in the right direction. So now you're going in the right direction. And did you think, okay, now sociology, like the road is going to take you to police officer and so on and so forth?
Well, one other small aside, when I went to Benedict's, I had tried to get into the Naval Academy. I wanted to
Oh,
go to the Naval Academy. I was a poor high school student, middle of 500 in my class. I was in the middle. So there was no reason why the Naval Academy would have taken me, except for my long desire. My dad had served in the Navy in the South Pacific in World War II. I wanted to do that. When I went down to Benedict's, I tried again, went to
mm,
Topeka to take the test, did not get in. So I wasn't quite sure how this all was going to work out. I come from a large police family. My
okay.
five uncles, my grandfather, my brothers.
Wow.
Um, so it seemed like where I wanted to go. And more through sociology, Father Terrence, who was the head of the department, I really kind of thought that's what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
But I also had a hankering, Janelle, for Navy service. So again, make a long story short, my father died my freshman year, was
Mm,
very disruptive to our large family.
sure.
School was very, very good. It was my first plane ride home was for my father's funeral. And I remember sitting on that plane, looking out the window of a Continental airline, no longer in service, and thinking, seeing the blue sky. And I said, boy, I got to tell my dad about this. Then realizing at that instant, he's not
Yeah.
alive.
Yeah.
So I came back to school, finished that first year, got into second year, and there frankly was money problems. And I still did have a hankering for the service. I quit college. I went up and met with Father Lambert, who I think was the dean then. And he really sat down and talked to me very personally about, I understand your situation. I understand why you're doing that. You're always welcome back. I
Mm.
went down and joined the Navy, got on a ship. The Navy maybe saw something in me that Benedict's did and said, we want you to go back to school.
Oh,
So they
wow.
put me in an officer candidate program. Went back to Benedict's. Benedict's welcomed me with open arms, and I had to catch up with my students. So I'm interjecting, not quite in your questions, but
It's
it was
okay.
the thread. It was the thread of care that
Yeah.
the administration gave me, my contemporaries, um, and the rule of St. Benedict's. I got to tell you that I probably didn't focus enough on as a freshman and a sophomore, but it rang true in what I wanted to do in my work in my public service career in policing about the things that St. Benedict's rekindled as it became Benedictine College
Yeah.
on what it means to be a Benedictine.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, is that a wandering answer. I
No,
apologize.
such a great answer. So I'm curious though, what was the time frame when you went to be in the Navy and you were on the ship and then they told you go back? What was that length of time?
That was I left after the uh, first semester sophomore year. So it was breaking into what, 67,
Mm-hmm.
1967. So I was away for the entire year of
Oh, wow.
1967, missed the big national NAIA championship of the Ravens, which I longed to be a part of because I followed them, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fast changing times in America.
Mm-hmm.
But when I came back to Benedict's, again, they with open arms um, to, and I went back right into the same group of guys who we gathered with in St. Joe Hall were now moving the various dorms together. So I was able to maneuver in with my same crew.
Was
Uh,
that surprising to you that it was just almost like so fluid? Like you kind of took a right turn there and then you came back and you were just like, it's like I never left.
well, it did feel like that.
Oh,
It, it,
yeah.
it did feel like that. I was, the Navy was not as liberal as things as the college was.
Mm-hmm.
Or as my family and my mom was, or my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, was you did what? You quit college, you joined the Navy. What the heck is going on in your life?
Yeah.
Shouldn't we be talking about these things? But Benedict's was very good at it. And then again, maybe to jump to 1969, I took 21 hours my last semester
Holy
in
cow.
in order to meet the minimum. Again, anybody who knows anything about college, 21 hours is
That's a
not
lot.
what you want to take in your last semester.
Right.
But Janelle, I was humping,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everybody was very helpful in that. And I think I needed like 2 hours. And a good friend who was up there, John Hauk, was the editor of the one of the paper, the student paper, and he said, "Come on, join the paper, do this work, and I can give you 2 hours."
Well, there
And
you
that
go.
2 hours helped put me over the hump.
Then you're like, now I can graduate and be, you don't want to say be done, but like kind of be like, okay, look it, I did it. I did it. The road might have been a little windy, but you got there. That's amazing. So you graduate from Benedictine, from St. Benedict's in 69. And then I mean, you've got just such a amazing list, career list. Could you speak into that and how just life
Sure.
kind of kept going?
Well, the Navy, because I now owed them service, because they sent me back to Officer Candidate School out in Newport, Rhode Island. Uh, that was all the summer of 69. My wife, my fiance, was in Chicago, a nurse. She was a year ahead of me in school. I met her in high school. So we dated through the college time, through the Navy
Wow.
time. Got married in 69 and went on the Chicago Police Department while the Navy was waiting to bring me back on active duty. And pretty much
Wow.
by the January of 1970, now married for 6 or 7 months. I was called to active duty, went aboard a ship on the East Coast, which I enjoyed. It was different, but I really wanted to get to Vietnam. So I volunteered for duty in Vietnam. The military was looking for people who wanted to go to Vietnam.
Hmm.
I did, and they made some promises to me. I talked to my wife about that. I went to Vietnam. They sent me to language school, and I was an advisor at Harbor Defense Unit on the riverboats of Vietnam. Came back from there, rejoined the police department, and restarted my police career.
How was that? Like you joined the police department and they knew very well that you needed to go and do this. You had to fulfill that obligation. And they just kind of like Benedictine, like, okay, go do that. And then there's a seat when you come back.
It was, I think they all had the same attitude about service, so
Mm,
it wasn't like I'm gonna do something foolish, although
right,
some
right.
might think going to Vietnam was foolish. It seemed like a good idea at the time. But I think it was service oriented, and I believe the Augustinians helped with that. I believe the Benedictines helped with that. I think the Navy helped with that. The police department helped with that, and my family, my wife, was wonderfully supportive.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it sounds like it. Because so 69, so you guys have been married for how long?
By the time we were married in August 30th, 1969, and I was on active duty for the next 3 years, from 70
Wow.
almost through 72, and came back out of Vietnam, back to Chicago in late 1972.
So really that, the newlywed stage of your marriage, you guys were apart.
Very
Yeah. Yes.
absence does make the heart grow fonder,
It
fortunately.
does. I have said that before. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so looking back at your career, were there your service career, were there goals or aspirations you had in mind as because really you climbed the ladder, Chicago PD to Illinois State Police, Capitol Police, Sergeant at Arms. Were there aspirations you had in mind when you originally started? And do you feel like looking back, like Benedictine showed up in different ways throughout that time?
Oh, they they clearly did. There's so many side stories of Benedictine and Benedictine people down there, and I'll go jump back to 1968, the Democratic Convention. I had been in the police academy that summer.
Mhm.
Between my summer, the
Wow.
police department was hiring very quickly. I got into the Chicago Police Department as a summer job, and I went through the
Wow.
academy. I graduated a week early before the 1968 Democratic Convention
Holy cow.
because they needed young cops, well-dressed cops to manage what we thought were going to be tumultuous times.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, John Sedek, who ultimately was a professor at Benedictine, one of my roommates over the years at Benedict's, he was, I don't know if John was there when you were there. He must have been teaching
He
when you were
was.
there.
Yeah.
And a character. John's a wonderful friend and a character. He wanted to get into the convention in Chicago, which was hard to do. But
Mhm.
fortunately, I was a policeman guarding one of the entrances. I got John onto the floor.
That's hilarious.
So it was interesting. He enjoyed it. And I know I'm probably not tracking where you want to go on this, but now go after that. Back to St. Benedict's, took a leave from the police department. Navy expects me to get back to college. I'm back there. Now it's the fall of 68. Picture, if you can, what America was going through after that. Still the war going on. And
Mhm.
who shows up at a speaker at Benedict's in the late fall or January of 1969, but Julian Bond.
Hmm.
Julian Bond was a very active social activist back then, a young African American, started uh, the students for something, 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 was very disruptive at the convention. And he comes at a speaker at Benedict's where I would have never thought this guy would end up being
Yeah.
invited to Benedict's because he didn't stand for it back then, the things that St. Benedict's did. So he gets an address. I imagine it was in the gymnasium, the
Hmm.
old gymnasium, and he starts really kind of bad mouthing Chicago, the police department, and asked for questions. I stood up and gave him some answers, and he said, "How the heck do you know so much about the convention?" I said, "I was there as a policeman." And so we had this interesting conversation. He and his entourage then went up with us to Senior Hall, where we
Hmm.
did have a cache of beer, and we talked through the night about that.
Oh my gosh.
So it was just so interesting to see these different entwines.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and he turned out to be a tremendous leader with Martin Luther King and had his ups and downs.
Wow.
But I'm way wandering from
No,
you get a
but
lot
that
of
is a
editing. You get
tremendous
a lot of
story.
editing to do,
That no, but that's a tremendous story. I mean, it's so crazy how Benedictine in its middle of the country, middle of Kansas, small but mighty. We all go out and then you run into people that are connected 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, if you will. I think that was a thing, back in the day, and you can't go too far. And so for him to show up probably blew your mind, and you're like, wait a second.
Well, it was, but back to probably let me get more back to as time grows on. Here I
Yeah.
am out of Washington as the deputy chief of police, head of operations for the DC Police Department, and I'm there when in a large part of the any large event, and it's the right to life marches.
Mm.
And who is out there in full force but Benedictine College.
Yeah.
So while I was in full uniform, I marched with them on several occasions at the Right to Life. And then as I went over to the Capitol Police as the chief, and then to the Senate Sergeant of Arms, having a lot of interactions with President Minnis, I had large control of areas of the Capitol.
Mhm.
In the whole new convention center, I invited on 2 different times all the students from St. Benedict's who marched to come into the Capitol, into the large visitor center that we build, and ate there, sang the school song there, and it echoed through
Oh,
the
that's
U.S.
tremendous.
Capitol. But it
Oh my
was
gosh.
through St. Benedict's, the march, the students. I ended up hiring students from St. Benedict's or
Yeah.
Benedictine College to work for me. So it's been an important part of my life.
The intensity of your career, I'm sure there were, different situations that pushed hard on your core values. Is there one or two stories that really pushed you to your limit and you had to figure out how to navigate through that and be able to kind of stay above board and stay to where you hold yourself accountable?
Yes, one does stick on my mind. I was the head of the Illinois State Police from about 91 till 98, appointed by Republican Governor Jim Edgar, which surprised me that he appointed me because I wasn't active in politics, although on campus I was the president of the Collegiate Young Democrats. But nonetheless, I'm in that job. I had been in my younger police days as a homicide detective many years. I was very pro death penalty, but I grew out of that as I matured, and I think I got closer to my faith and understood that.
Mhm.
And the death penalty was reinstated in Illinois, and there has to be an official witness for death penalties. I was known to be a death penalty advocate. Governor Edgar, we have to have 3 state officials be the official witnesses. I was selected to be that. So I went to the execution of John Wayne Gacy, a prolific murderer of young children, killed some 33 kids. And someone, again, if you just go by the depravity of his crime, who but he deserved the death penalty. So I went to the death penalty, sat through that. And again, we could do another podcast on that. The enormity of that, sitting in that small room, watching his execution, watching him die, watching him breathe his last breath, stunned me. So we got through that, and then I did not enjoy that at all. I completely changed my whole attitude because police service life was to save lives. It didn't seem right to witness and celebrate the end of one. The next execution was coming up. It was going to be a female. Wheaton College is a small denomination college up here in Wheaton, Illinois. And I was asked at some point after that execution to speak at Wheaton College as the head of the state police. So it was a large auditorium, a lot of students, very religious. And one of the questions at the end asked me about the death penalty. And I related at length from the time I entered that penitentiary till the time I left what I was going through, the sounds, the sight, and the taste of it, and related my abhorrence of the death penalty. Well, shortly thereafter, the headlines of the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Sun-Times, where as a department head of a governor, you don't want to be above the fold, indicates that the governor's head of the state police opposes the death penalty. And the governor called me in. He was a very Christian guy, a wonderful governor, gave me complete authority to run the department. He said, Terry, it just doesn't seem you can be operating against me on these things. And I said, Governor, I get that. And what we devised was I would no longer have to go to death penalty executions, but I wouldn't stand up and give speeches against it. So that didn't present itself. So I had a successful career with the governor, but it required, I suppose that's not even completely standing up, because while I didn't have to go to another death penalty, if anybody ever asked me about the death penalty and fellow policemen thought I was traitor, that I wouldn't support this, but that was a turning moment.
I empathize completely, and to some degree, I should say. But just to have, because how old were you, if you don't mind me asking, when you were having that meeting with the governor?
You help me here, 47 to about 93 or 4. So in my late 30s.
Okay. So to be still young, right? Like to go and stand up in front of a powerful person and say, I can't do this. And here's why. I think there's a testament even just to having the courage to say that to someone who could pretty much destroy your career for the rest of your life, right? So, kudos. I mean, for what it's worth. I mean, that's tough. But I think it probably shaped you and then the trajectory of your mentality for the rest of your career too, and probably how you looked at people and how you served them, I would imagine.
Right.
Yeah. Reflecting on some of your life decisions, can you identify a moment when you had a strong connection to the values that were instilled with you at Benedictine? And maybe that's the example of having the courage to talk to the governor in that capacity.
I think that is one. And, in retrospect, I go back to my sociology training. As a policeman, I kind of felt I was a street corner sociologist. And so, I remember Father Terrence, again, I just thought a wonderful professor. We talked about meeting people where they're at. And that wasn't a term that rolled off my tongue as a young police officer, but it certainly did as I moved up the ranks and became a director and then a deputy chief and a chief of several different agencies, where meeting people where they're at and understanding what they're going through is very important. And I do remember a conversation I had with my wife when we were newly married, very young. I had been working in the uniform division, uniform police officer on the south side of Chicago, where all the high rises were up, Janelle. And these were housing, to me, it was like a prison, 35-foot prison with fencing in there and too many single young women having children. And it was a poor neighborhood, a lot of crime. And I remember going home and my wife, I was working afternoon shift, was the busy shift. She was a nurse working in emergency rooms, and I went home saying, I don't think we're going to arrest our way out of this. And it just doesn't seem to be the values I learned at Benedict's or at Mendel High School about what Catholicism is supposed to be about. So I somehow feel that I'm arresting the children of
Mm.
people my older brothers and my uncles arrested. And I said, if we keep this up, my kids, some who became policemen, are going to be arresting the grandkids because
Mm.
the environment we put folks in wasn't conducive. We, in policing, we didn't meet them where they were. So lock them up, get them off the street was what we thought we should be doing. And I had to get back to the values of Benedict's and that sociology, and then graduate school sociology and law school to try to put together a different way to approach public service. And so I'm wondering, so forgive me.
And how did that conversation with your wife, like the next day or the next week when you went out on patrol, did you have a different eyes, or did you like, how did you adjust? I'm sure it wasn't dramatic, but the next time you were in that area with those high rises.
Well, you still had to be awful safe. I mean, because
Sure.
it was a dangerous environment for me as a policeman, but it was doubly dangerous for those kids and teenagers growing up there.
Right.
I had to keep remembering myself every day that I've got to meet them where they're at.
Hmm.
Even though I didn't know that term, I learned that
Hmm.
term later.
Hmm.
But that was the formation of it. So I just wanted to be better at what I was doing and getting along with the people I was working with who might have not been as far as their faith as I thought I was,
Right.
um, and work together.
Yeah. And that's really what it's about, because that's how change can happen, and to see them for who they are, not maybe the decisions they're making. I'm sure that was a challenge for you and in your career. But one question I do have for you, if you don't mind us kind of switching gears here, is how did your grandson just recently graduated from Benedictine? How did watching him walk across that stage resonate with you, not only as a grandfather, but as a Raven, as a fellow Raven?
It was great because he was there, and because let me go back to Sedek's an old friend. I know he had a different relationship with maybe with the president up there, and I think that says a lot about the college that you can have professors up there with different perspectives.
Mhm.
Every time I went back to Benedict's, and I did on many trips, Steve Menace and his staff treated me like a king. Sedek did too. I got to get into classrooms, 3 or 4 classrooms, either in sociology or criminal justice or political science, and talk about these things. I was excited about the students. I enjoyed seeing Catholicism grow at Benedict's. When I first went back and went in and saw young ladies kneeling on the floor with their hair covered like it was when I grew up, I thought that was enriching. When I saw how young Ryan Gaynor took to that, was involved in the Catholic elements of Benedictine College, that cheered me on.
Mm.
And for the at some point, as he was going through his time at Benedict's, which was imperfect too because of his study habits, and but I saw him rebound. I saw people reach out to him, and I said, I think this kid could be a priest. I think that'd be pretty cool if he
Oh,
was a priest.
wow. Yeah.
But he fell in love, and that's fair too.
Yeah, that's totally
So
fair.
that was again a long answer. I was very, very proud of him,
Yeah.
and wonderfully happy for both his father and his mother, who were Marquette graduates, for them to be so excited about St. Benedict's, Benedictine College, and say it changed our son.
That's tremendous. I think it's good that it's imperfect, because it teaches us far more if it is that way than Pollyanna and just everything is sunshine and roses, I think. And the great thing about Benedictine is, with its imperfections and your imperfect experience, you have a community around you to keep you on track and bring you back like they did for you, and make sure that you're headed towards the finish line, and then kind of lift you off after you graduate. So speaking of graduation, what advice would you have to recent graduates who want to get into public service?
Well, I'd implore them to consider it. Listen, I love law enforcement. My oldest son was an FBI agent at life. I got a son who was a lieutenant on the police department in Washington, a son-in-law, my wife's 3 brothers. Policing is very important to us.
Mhm.
I think it needs good Christian people to be in public service, to meet people where they're at, bring what you can to them to help them along. I say apply to a lot of places. Don't be afraid to take chances. From the south side of Chicago, with my 10 brothers and sisters, I was the first to go off to college.
Oh,
So
wow.
you've got to be a little bit of a risk taker
Hmm.
and assume that that you're going to learn and grow from it. So you got to seize those opportunities.
Yeah, take a chance. Because you did when talking to that governor, and then I'm sure all the way up to sergeant at arms. Maybe that wasn't on, on your radar to begin with. Well, from a wannabe math teacher to where you ended up, it was kind of a left and a right turn. But I
Yeah,
have
who'd have
one
thunk
more.
it? Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah, right. I have one more question for you, and before I ask it, I just want to thank you so much for just an incredible conversation. You are an incredible person, inspirational person, and you've truly lived a life of service and from one Raven to another and one American to another. I genuinely thank you, Terry. So from the Raven perspective, 56 years out, what does it mean to you when I say once a Raven, always a Raven?
Ravens fly high.
Yeah.
So it means a lot to me. It was a very important part of our life, continues to be. And every one of my children and their spouses can sing Ravens Are Flying High in the Sky. My grandkids can do it now. It echoed many times through the halls of the United States Capitol when someone from Benedict's came and visited me, and they always got up there that we would sing that. I had a beautiful office that the presidents used to come in. President Obama came in one time and said, Gaynor, you got a better office than I had. But I want to tell you, the Ravens are very important to me.
Right. Ravens fly on high, forever and always.
That's right.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for joining us on Always a Raven. New episodes drop every Tuesday, and you're not going to want to miss them. Our guests are reigniting the hearts of Ravens throughout all generations. And wow, we've got some amazing guests coming up. So be sure to like and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're a new Raven or a potential Raven, be sure to check out our website at benedictine.edu. And remember, once a Raven, always a Raven.